If you're a Jew living in Jesus' day, one of your heroes would likely have been the prophet Elijah. You never tire of hearing all the stories of Elijah and how he followed God in the midst of desperate times, how he put his life on the line time and time again for God. You'd listen on the edge of your seats as Elijah alone confronted the 450 priests of Moloch in a dramatic battle to the death. You would see Elijah filled with the strength and power of God, running ahead of a chariot. You'd watch as the widow of Zarephath fed Elijah her very last meal, and you'd be filled with wonder as God kept on refilling her jars of food after that. You'd cheer when Elijah raised the dead. You'd hear Elijah pronouncing doom on the kings with loud, dramatic voice. You'd tremble with Elijah on Mount Horeb as a great and powerful wind flung rocks past you. You'd be filled with fear as you lost your footing in an earthquake. You'd sweat with Elijah as a great fire engulfed all the shrubs and trees in the area. And then with Elijah, you'd hear the gentle whisper of God tugging at your heartstrings. The Elijah stories were powerful stories that gripped the imagination and the faith of the Jews, and all the Jews knew them inside and out. Elijah was truly the greatest prophet of God. On top of it all, who could forget that he single-handedly turned the Jewish nation back to God? And how? Because he prayed hard, he listened hard to God, and he boldly did what God called him to do, even in the face of death. So God could work through him in mighty ways. Well now, Luke chapter 9, verses 51 to 62 starts out, as the time drew near for Jesus to ascend to heaven, he resolutely set out for Jerusalem. Wait, did I just say ascend to heaven? This is what Elijah did. He ascended to heaven in a whirlwind that carried him in a fiery chariot and with horses of fire. The Jewish mind that heard Elijah's stories time and again would immediately know that Jesus was being compared to the great prophet Elijah.
This is going to be so good.
Yes, we can prepare ourselves for some action here, certainly. Things certainly won't be dull now that Luke has brought Elijah into the picture. So, here is Jesus, who is going to ascend into heaven. Will it be like Elijah? Will he do some of the same miracles as Elijah before he ascends into heaven? Or will he be even better than Elijah? Well, let's read on. Jesus' journey starts out, and he sends messengers to Samaria? Wait a second. Most Jews would walk around the Samaritan territory, even if it meant a lot of extra walking. What is Jesus doing? We don't know, but it'll be a confrontation, and it'll be good. Okay, so the messengers go to Samaria, and the Samaritans reject the messengers, which is no surprise. The Samaritans, who also worshipped God, but in a different place, Mount Gerizim, rejected the Jews who were off to worship God in Jerusalem. And I'm sad to say that the Samaritans and the Jews generally hated one another. So what will happen now? The Son of God, who is going to ascend into heaven, will he be like Elijah, calling down fire on his opponents? Hey, do you remember the story of Elijah calling down fire? Here's a bit of it, though you can read more of this story in 2 Kings chapter 1. Then King Ahaziah, son of King Ahab, sent an army captain with 50 soldiers to arrest Elijah. They found him sitting on top of a hill. The captain said to him, "Man of God, the king has commanded you to come down with us." But Elijah replied to the captain, "If I am a man of God, let fire come down from heaven and destroy you and your 50 men. Then fire fell from heaven and killed them all. So the king sent another captain with 50 men. The The captain said to him, "Man of God, the king demands that you come down at once." Elijah replied, "If I am a man of God, let fire come down from heaven and destroy you and your 50 men." And again, the fire of God fell from heaven and killed them all. Okay, the story continues, but I'll end here. This is undoubtedly the story that James and John had in mind when the Samaritans rejected Jesus. God had acted through Elijah in the past through many mighty shows of force. But Jesus was the Messiah and even more powerful than Elijah. So certainly God would do a spectacular miracle on the same sort of level as Elijah, right? Well, with this in mind, James and John say, "Lord, should we call down fire from heaven to burn them up?" So what would Jesus do? Oh, he rebuked them. He rebuked James and John. I know, who expected that twist to the story? Jesus was on his way to Jerusalem to end the whole Jewish oppression thing, and this was the time to fight with the power of God. And when the disciples suggest it, Jesus fails them and worse. He rebukes them and not the Samaritans. Rebuking is harsh. You don't rebuke your friends, you rebuke Satan. You rebuke demons. So here we know that Jesus was not going to be a figure like Elijah. Things were going to be different with him. Some early manuscripts add a verse to this story. They wrote that the Son of Man did not come to destroy people's lives, but to save them. When Jesus did not call down fire on the Samaritans, it was a clear message that he came to save them too. Only the disciples didn't get it, and that's why Jesus rebuked them. I also bet it was tempting for Jesus to destroy the hated Samaritans, to call on a showy presence filled with a mighty power of God so that all could see, instead of walking meekly to his death. But Jesus' way was not Elijah's way. Something different is going on. Okay, let's go on in the text and look at the next few verses. Someone said to Jesus, "I will follow you wherever you go." But Jesus replied, "Foxes have dens to live in, and birds have nests, but the Son of Man has no place even to lay his head." Well, this was Jesus' reality, and incidentally, Elijah's reality. If you wanted to follow Jesus at that point, be prepared for some hardships. Jesus then said to another person, "Come, follow me." The man agreed, but he said, "Lord, let me first return home and bury my father." Okay, if that man's father had just died, he'd be in the midst of funeral preparations and wouldn't be talking to Jesus. This fellow is basically saying, "Give me a few years until my father dies, and then I'll follow you." Jesus' retort showed that he knew this person. Your duty is to go and preach about the kingdom of heaven. Jesus was saying to this particular person, if you don't continue to follow me and do God's work, you're backing out. You need to choose God's will for your life that will bring you a deep and meaningful life filled with the presence and power of God, or your own comfort, your own past, your own traditions, the ones that are holding you back. Another said, "Yes, Lord, I will follow you, but first let me say goodbye to my family." Okay, this is a direct comparison to the stories of Elisha and Elijah. Elisha was Elijah's disciple, and he wanted to continue to be a prophet like Elijah. Well, let's look at a part of the story of Elijah and Elisha, and here Elisha is plowing his father's fields, and he sees Elijah. Here's what it says in the Bible. Elisha left the oxen standing there, ran after Elijah and said to him, "First, let me go and kiss my father and mother goodbye, and then I will go with you." Elijah replied, "Go on back, but think about what I have done to you." So Elisha returned to his oxen and slaughtered them. He used the wood from the plow to build a fire to roast their flesh. He passed around the meat to the townspeople, and they all ate. Then he went with Elijah as his assistant. So, what will Jesus say when the very same request is made of him that was made of Elijah by the prophet Elisha? Jesus told him, "Anyone who puts a hand to the plow and then looks back is not fit for the kingdom of God." Hey, Jesus had a different response than Elijah, but it makes sense. Elisha went back to his family with the express intent to say goodbye and then follow Elijah. He did something that would break him from his family. He killed the oxen that were used to plow the earth. There was no going back. The person asking Jesus, however, obviously did not have the same intention, and we know this from Jesus' reply. Jesus confronted them with the choice. Will they follow Jesus, or will they go back to their family and their customs and their way of doing things, and so perhaps never follow Jesus? The sentiment here is the same as we found in our current Bible study when Paul writes, "I focus on this one thing, forgetting the past and looking forward to what lies ahead, I press on." Here Paul is saying, along with what we're looking at in Luke, that Jesus is calling us to a new life with God. Forget the things in your past that don't lead to a new life with God. Let them go and move forward with God into your future. Easier said than done, I know, but this is part of your calling as a Christian. If you don't clear out past stuff that is dragging you down and move on, you can stay stuck in the same old ways of thinking, patterns of being, and you effectively can shut parts of yourself off from God if those ways of being and those patterns of being are not helpful for your journey with God. Now, I'm not saying that all stuff in our past is bad, not at all. I'm saying leave behind what prevents you from loving God with all your heart and mind and soul and strength. Today's passage is actually a call to all of us disciples of Jesus to take a hard look at what brings us security. What brings you security? Does money in the bank bring you security? Well, yes, of course it does if you have it. The question here is your money in the bank more important to you than God? Only you can answer this, perhaps with God's help. Does your health bring you security? Yes, of course it does if you have good health, and if you don't, you no doubt don't feel as secure. The question here is your health, or even lack of health, more important to you than God? Does your own intelligence or do your talents or opinions or something you do well bring you security? Well, yes, of course they do. The question here is, are your intelligence or talents or opinions or things you do well more important to you than God? If you don't know what brings you deep security, maybe take a hard look at your life and see what brings you anxiety or stress or fear. Then maybe you'll be able to figure out that those things that cause you anxiety or fear or stress are quite possibly things that threaten your sense of security, your sense of peace. Jesus calls each of us to place our security in all areas of our life in God. Yes, I'm under no illusions. It can be super, super hard to make that transition. Or rather, those transitions, because we tend to have security on more than one thing on earth. And it can be hard, really, really hard to take things one at a time and say to God, thank you for what I have, and God, I'm giving you this thing to use as you will. I place my trust in you and my security in your hands. This week, I invite you to prayerfully look at where you place your security in various areas of your life, physical, mental, and spiritual. If you find a place where your security does not lie first and foremost with God, pray and ask God for help, and maybe also reach out to a trusted spiritual person you know who can help you with this. After all, we Christians help one another and in turn are helped by one another. Let us pray. God, Jesus came and was different than the great prophet Elijah. Jesus came to help each of us, no matter who we are or our backgrounds, to learn to give our lives over to you one step at a time, so that we might live life with full meaning, love, hope, and peace. When our security is in your hands first and foremost, God, we can live more fully in your peace, your joy, your hope. Help us to look at our lives and see where we place our security. Help us to place our security in you in all things. Amen.